Hi, welcome to my Parsha Shir. Sefer Devarim, the fifth book of the Torah, is distinctive in that it is primarily a series of speeches that were delivered by Moshe Rabbeinu during the final weeks of his life. Now, unlike the previous four books of the Torah, which recount historical events and enumerate laws and are narrated by the Torah itself, Devarim is framed as a personal address from Moshe Rabbeinu to the Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, as he reflects on their past, their present, and primarily actually their future as they stand poised to enter the promised land. Moshe's journey as a leader is truly remarkable, especially considering his initial reluctance to accept this role. When God first called on him at the burning bush to become the leader and to take the Jewish people out of slavery in Egypt, Moshe hesitated. Specifically, he cited his inadequacy as a speaker. Lo ish devarim anochi, ki kvad peh ukvad loshon anochi. I'm not a man of words, I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. But by the time we reach Sefer Devarim, some 40 years later, we see a transformed Moshe. He is metamorphosed into a seasoned speaker, delivering a series of powerful and eloquent speeches as he prepares for the end of his life and to hand over the leadership to Yehoshua. This transformation is evidence of God keeping his promise to Moshe that he would assist him and provide him with the necessary tools for successful leadership, including the gift of effective communication. When Moshe expressed his concern about his speaking abilities, God said to him, Mi som pe la'odam, mi yosem ileim oicheresh, mi yosem pikeach ha'iver, halo anoichi Hashem, va'ato lecha, va'anoichi eya impicha, va'resicha asher tedaber. Who gave human beings their mouths? God asked Moshe rhetorically. Who gave them, who makes the deaf? Who makes the mute? Who gives them the ability to see or makes them blind? Is it not I, Hashem? Now go, and I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. And as we can see in Devarim, God's promise was fulfilled. Moshe became a great speaker, a fantastic communicator. The classical commentaries often discuss Moshe's transformation from a poor communicator into a gifted orator, and they add actually further context. For example, the Malbim notes that Moshe's speeches in Devarim are not just a repetition of the laws in the Torah, word for word from the original, but actually they are an interpretation of those laws with guidelines about how they are to be applied. Moshe was so effective that he was able to elaborate and explain the complex mitzvahs of the Torah so that they would be better understood. The Sforno also comments on Moshe's transformation, emphasizing that Moshe's reluctance and his subsequent growth are meant to convey to us the divine assistance he received, which turned him into what he subsequently became. If God promises, God will deliver, and he did. Moshe was living proof of Va'anochi eya impicha v'resicha asher tedaber. Sforno also explains that Moshe's initial hesitation was not just about a speech impediment, but actually it reflected his deep humility and his recognition of the weighty responsibility of leadership. And now we see that even humble people, modest people, reluctant people can become great leaders, inspiring a nation and creating a legacy. Moshe's speeches in Devarim are a mixture of historical episodes being recalled, laws, ethical exhortations, and prophecies. Moshe used these addresses to remind the Bnei Yisrael of their covenant with God, the lessons learned from their wilderness experiences, and the importance of adhering to the Torah's commandments as they transitioned into a new chapter of their national existence. Parshas Devarim opens with Moshe Rabbeinu addressing the Bnei Yisrael on the eastern side of the Jordan River. The Israelites, the Jewish people, are on the cusp of entering the Promised Land, and Moshe, who is aware that he will not join them, takes this moment to recount their journey, the challenges they faced over the years, 40 years, and also the lessons learned. The importance of recalling history is a central theme of Moshe's speeches in Devarim, as it is through remembering their past that the Jewish people will be able to understand their identity and their purpose. Rashi, commenting on the opening words of Devarim, explains the nature of Moshe's rebuke that are included, his rebukes included in those words, and why he chose to deliver it in a veiled manner. The parsha begins, Eile hadvarim. These are the words. Rashi says that the word Eile, these, is specifically there to draw our attention to the fact that these are words of rebuke. Moshe enumerates all the places where the Bnei Yisrael angered God. But, says Rashi, he spoke in coded language, referring to each incident only by inference, out of regard for the nation's dignity. By referring to the locations where the negative events happened rather than to the events themselves, Moshe preserved the dignity of the Israelites, even as he delivered the necessary rebuke. By referring, he had to refer to the events, but he didn't want to do so in a way that would embarrass them. Rashi also explains that Moshe chose to address all the Israelites together, El Kol Yisrael, to all of Israel, so that no one could claim later that they would have responded differently had they been present when he spoke, but because they weren't there, they couldn't respond. The message Moshe delivered was crystal clear, and everyone had the opportunity to respond if they wished, although of course no one responded because they knew he was 100% right. But why didn't Moshe simply give the rebuke in a clear, outspoken manner? Why was it given over in coded language that needed deciphering? The Be'er Mayim Chaim offers a deep insight into why Moshe spoke in this very veiled, vague manner. He suggests that the concealment was not for the Bnei Yisrael themselves, because of course they already knew about the events, and they understood it in code. It was given in code, but they understood it just as clearly as if it had been stated explicitly. Rather, the coded language was a deliberate ploy to obscure Moshe's tough talking from the nations of the world. After all, the Torah was going to be translated into 70 languages before Moshe died. He wrote it down, and the nations would get a chance then to read it. And so, by concealing the rebukes in coded language, Moshe ensured that the dignity of the Bnei Yisrael was maintained even when outsiders read their history. Moshe's recounting of the history of the last 40 years since he'd become the leader served several purposes. Firstly, it reminded the Bnei Yisrael of their collective experiences and of God's continuous guidance throughout their time since they left Egypt. Secondly, the recounting offered up a moral lesson, emphasizing the importance of faith, obedience, and repentance as a surefire way to keep the nation alive, even in the most difficult situations imaginable. And thirdly, it was about establishing a national identity for the Jewish people, collective identity. By recalling their past, Moshe was ensuring that the Israelites, the Jewish people, understood their identity and their mission as God's chosen people, as a nation in the service of God and for the service of God. One of the most striking characteristics of Moshe's leadership was his humility, says the Chasam Sofer. Despite his powerful position, he was the leader, Moshe remained humble, always attributing his successes to God. The Chasam Sofer notes that this humility was a critical factor in Moshe's ability to lead effectively. It allowed him to stay connected to the people and to God, and it ensured that his leadership was always in service of a higher purpose. The Chasam Sofer also points out that Moshe's journey as a leader was marked by constant growth and adaptability. From the moment he accepted God's mission, all those years ago, Moshe was open to learning and developing. This willingness to grow and to adapt was essential in enabling him to lead the Jewish people through the many challenges that they faced in the Midbar, in the wilderness. And finally, the Chasam Sofer tells us that in Sefer Devarim, Moshe's speeches are forward-looking, focusing on preparing the Jewish nation for their future in the Promised Land, a future without him, Some leaders say, après moi le déluge. Who cares what happens after I'm gone? Especially if those leaders are ousted from their position of leadership, as Moshe was. The Chasam Sofer highlights that a key aspect of Moshe's leadership, even in his final weeks, was this future-oriented approach. And by focusing on the future, Moshe was able to inspire hope and confidence in the people, encouraging them to strive for their ultimate goals. Moshe's speeches in Devarim are rich with historical recounting. He meticulously goes over the events that the Jewish nation had experienced, the mistakes that they'd made, and the consequences that followed. As we've already said, this approach served several purposes: learning from past mistakes, strengthening faith and trust in Hashem, and building a collective identity. By recalling the mistakes and the rebellions, Moshe hoped to prevent future transgressions. The Israelites' past failures were not presented to them merely to chastise them, to tell them off, but to guide them towards better choices in the future. Additionally, Moshe recounts the numerous instances of divine intervention and the miracles that the Bnei Israel witnessed and experienced. By remembering these events, the people were reminded of God's constant presence and support, strengthening their faith and their trust in Him. And finally, the shared history of the Jewish people served as a unifying factor, creating this collective identity, this nation identity rooted in common experiences and divine purpose. This collective memory is essential. It's always essential for maintaining national cohesion and purpose. And that is why it was so important for Moshe to record all of these historical events, warts and all, no holds barred, full transparency, even when the stories were not so complementary. In fact, the importance of knowing and learning from history is a theme that transcends religious texts and finds strong resonance even in general culture as well. Numerous historians, philosophers and leaders have emphasized the critical role that history plays in shaping societies and guiding future actions. Perhaps the most famous quote on the importance of history comes from the Spanish-American philosopher. He was an essayist, he was a poet, he was a novelist, George Santayana, who said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." This pithy statement succinctly captures the essence of why knowing and remembering history is so essential, because it serves as a repository of collective experiences, providing valuable lessons that can help avoid past mistakes. The Pulitzer Prize-winning historian David McCullough, who wrote acclaimed and best-selling biographies of, for example, President Truman and John Adams, in his book Brave Companions, Portraits in History, writes, "History is who we are and why we are the way we are," highlighting the idea that our present and future are deeply rooted in our historical experiences. Understanding history gives us insight into the forces and events that have shaped our current reality. Another perspective was offered by the Nobel laureate Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, who said, "Without memory, there is no culture. Without memory, there would be no civilization, no society, no future." Wiesel was emphasizing that memory is foundational to culture and identity. Forgetting our history would mean losing our sense of self and the values that define us. And then you have the words of Sir Winston Churchill, who won a Nobel Prize for literature, actually. For as the this is what they said, the Nobel Committee put it, his mastery of historical and biographical description. Now, Churchill said, study history, study history. In history lies all the secrets of statecraft. He also said, the farther backward you can look, the further forward you are likely to see. And I love this quote from him, said only half tongue-in-cheek. History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it. Churchill was known for his deep understanding of history, and he believed that knowledge of the past was crucial for effective governance and leadership. This idea, and the earlier ones I cited, obviously align very closely with Moshe Rabbeinu's approach in Sefer Devarim, where he uses history as a tool for teaching and for guiding the Bnei Israel. Like Santayana, Moshe warns the Bnei Israel that forgetting their past would lead them to repeat their mistakes. McCullough's assertion that history defines who we are echoes Moshe Rabbeinu's efforts to build a collective identity for the Israelites through their shared experiences. Elie Wiesel's focus on memory as the bedrock of culture aligns with Moshe's recounting of divine interventions and miracles to instill faith and values in the people. And finally, Sir Winston Churchill's belief in the importance of history for effective leadership reflects Moshe's use of historical lessons to prepare the Israelites, the Jewish nation, for their future in the Promised Land. Parshas Devarim, and indeed the whole book of Devarim, underscore the critical importance of memory and legacy. Moshe's recounting of the Israelites' history serves not only as a record of past events, but as a vital tool for teaching and guiding future generations, the people who would never have met him. Remembering the past is essential for building a better future, for fostering identity, and for ensuring that leadership is sound and effective. In his autobiography, Megillah Sefer, Rav Yaakov Emden shares his life story, chronicling his experiences, challenges, and the historical events of his time. He begins with a reflection on the importance of preserving history, not only for the sake of posterity, but also as a means of understanding and appreciating the present. He writes about the need to remember and record events accurately, as they provide lessons and insights that can guide future generations. Rav Yaakov Emden's motivation for writing Megillah Sefer was multifaceted. He was a multifaceted man. He aimed to provide a truthful account of his life and the events he'd witnessed, and to counter falsehoods and misconceptions. In addition to that, he wanted to leave a legacy that would inspire and instruct his descendants and the broader Jewish community. In his introduction to Megillah Sefer, Rav Yaakov Emden writes about the significance of historical memory. Ki ra'isi l'doros ha'achronim, asher yokumu achareinu shelo yishaer zecher l'doros harishonim. Yishkechu yemei olam u'ma'aseim, ki lo hoyu gam heim, v'lo ya'amdu al mahus hazmanim, v'atachlufos hamadinos, im shecheinehem, lochein amarti, leman yamoid hadovar ledoir achroin. For I have seen, he said, that future generations which will rise after us will not retain the memory of the previous generations. They will forget the days of old and their matters as if they never existed, and they will not understand the essence of the times and the changes of states with their neighbors. Therefore, I said to myself that this matter should stand for the last generation. Now, this passage from Megillah Sefer highlights Rabbi Yaakov Emden's concern that without a written record, future generations would lose touch with their history and the valuable lessons that it holds. He is stressing that knowing and understanding history is essential for comprehending the present and making informed decisions for the future. One story that illustrates Rabbi Yaakov Emden's dedication to memory and to history involves a dispute that he had with the Frankists, a sect that was led by Jacob Frank. And that sect posed a significant threat to traditional Judaism in the 18th century. Rabbi Yaakov Emden meticulously documented his encounters with the Frankists, recording their blasphemies and heretical actions in vivid detail. His accounts provide a crucial historical record that helped later generations understand the dangers posed by this deviant sect of quasi-Jews and, of course, others like it, and reinforced the importance of vigilance in preserving Jewish faith and practice. Rav Yaakov Emden's commitment to preserving history extended well beyond his writings. He also actively encouraged others to document their experiences and the events of their times. He believed that by doing so, they would contribute to a collective memory that would strengthen and sustain the Jewish people. His approach to memory and to history aligns with the themes in Parshas Devarim, where Moshe Rabbeinu emphasizes the importance of recalling the Israelites' journey and the lessons that were learned along the way. Through remembering and recording our history, we can better understand our identity and navigate the challenges of the present and the future. Let me conclude by reflecting on the different ideas I've already mentioned in today's shir. We began by exploring the whole idea of the book of Devarim being a collection of speeches given by Moshe Rabbeinu during the last 5 weeks of his life, and the remarkable transformation that these speeches show regarding the man he had become. From being someone who initially shied away from leadership due to his speech impediment, as he put it, Moshe Rabbeinu had evolved into a master orator. This metamorphosis accentuates the divine promise that God equips leaders with the necessary tools for their mission. So too in our lives, God is always there at our side, doing everything to help us in our efforts at self-improvement. And it works. As we get older, we see how skilled we have become in certain areas, whereas earlier in life, we really didn't have a clue. That is all because God gave us the boost when we set out to do what He wanted us to do. Moshe's journey from self-doubt to becoming the quintessential leader of Israel is an inspiration. It teaches us that a good life is best described as a process of growth. And with divine assistance, one can overcome any personal limitations to fulfill our destiny. In the shir today, we also set the scene. Parshas Devarim opens with Moshe addressing the Bnei Yisrael on the eastern side of the Jordan River as they stand on the cusp of entering the Promised Land. But Moshe doesn't just give them banal words of encouragement. He gives them a hard time. He recounts their journey and the challenges that they faced and the lessons that they learnt. Rashi points out that Moshe's words are both a historical recounting and a rebuke, carefully calibrated rhetorically in order to maintain the dignity of the people. The Be'er Maim Chaim says that Moshe spoke in a coded language to prevent their disgrace in the eyes of other nations. This was entre nous, not something that was meant to be used as a tool to bash the Jewish people. We also explored the theme of legacy and memory through the work of Rabbi Yaakov Emden. His autobiography, Megillah Sefer, emphasizes the necessity of preserving our history to understand our present and to guide our future. Rabbi Yaakov Emden's dedication to documenting his experiences and the events of his time underscores the vital role of historical memory in maintaining Jewish identity and Jewish values. Parshas Devarim invites us to reflect on our own journeys and to consider the legacies we leave behind. Through Moshe's example, we can learn that every step we take, every challenge we face, and every memory we preserve contributes to our spiritual growth and our collective identity. As we navigate our paths, we should draw strength from our history, we should draw unity from our community, and we should draw inspiration from the Torah to truly fulfill our unique roles and purposes in life. Thank you for joining me in this exploration, and may we continue to grow and learn together. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.